we hope to live in harmony with the citizens.
We can expect Zagon to commence and sustain all knowledge and weapons. Our ionization layer must be maintained until our relocation is effected.
Good.
Relocation? To where?
I don't remember anything else really being...
To your
Cinematic dumpster fire right here on the Ghost of Hollywood. And for more information on the helicopter crash that occurred on the set of the Twilight Zone film.
For another segment of the
Come on. It's time for the Ghost of Hollywood.
Welcome back to the Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and tonight we are ready to get wild with all of you party people out there as we continue to amp up the second season.
And tonight may be the best episode yet, because my good friend, Penelope Spheeris, who has directed many films, some of which have become household names, such as Wayne's World or Little Rascals, is going to be joining us here on the show shortly. She is also well known in the cinematic cult circle for her independent film work as a narrative director on movies such as Dudes, Hollywood Vice Squad, and The Boys Next Door. But it would be her work as a documentary filmmaker on what is now known as the Decline of the Western Civilization series, for which many know her best.
And while Decline allowed the world its first look inside of the Los Angeles punk community in the late 70s, it would be Penelope's narrative adaptation of the same punk movement, which she would portray in her 1984 film, Suburbia. Not to be confused with the 1996 film by Richard Linklater, which uses the same title. Suburbia would become one of the few honest narrative depictions of the then-emerging 80s hardcore punk scene. Despite the Corman gimmicks, well known as cinematic selling points for B-movies, much of which we will discuss with Penelope later, Suburbia holds well to this day in its depiction of the desolate realities that on-set culture, whether it be contemporary or, in this instance, a new emergence onto society.
I like how you put that together there.
Oh yeah, what?
A new emergence into society.
That's right, a great voice once said, "Today's world is now, and punk is here to stay."
Ooh, tell me more of your glue-ridden Bristol poetry.
Now there's a description, I like that one.
No one even knows what we're talking about.
Well look, glue-ridden Bristol poetry is only for a select few, you dig?
Get out of here with that shit, Poxy.
Oh, okay, back on point. The cast of Suburbia is largely unknown, aside from Chris Peterson and Michael Balzery. Peterson had some smaller roles following Suburbia in movies like Platoon, and Balzery went on to play in some huge band named after a nightshade. Maybe you've heard of them, Reagan.
Didn't they make an appearance in that Josh Brolin skateboard movie that was like the Powell Peralta version of West Side Story?
Oh, yeah, I forgot that the Chili Peppers were in Thrashin'. OG lineup right there, like post-game fans just don't know. Sort of has that Beastie Boys Pollywog Stew kind of status to it, I fucking love that shit.
The Chili Peppers?
No, Pollywog Stew.
Anyway, Flea, in case you're still in the dark here, would work with Penelope again on the 1987 punk comedy Dudes, starring John Cryer and Daniel Roebuck. Dudes has a screenplay that takes you all over the place, but it's definitely a fun flick to watch regardless.
I think Penelope and John Cryer made that screenplay work together, given what I'd heard about it behind the scenes. When I talked with Randall Johnson at a screening of Dudes back over the summer that Weird War put together, I kind of got this, I didn't know, to be honest, all right? I didn't know that he had written the Doors screenplay, so that kind of left me making these loose connections at the Roebuck native stuff, and the same stuff Jim Morrison experiences throughout the Doors film.
Oddly enough, I can see how the two correlate. Did you ask him about it?
No.
Dumbass.
What? Why am I dumbass?
You brought up an interesting point and waited to share it with me, but not the guy who wrote the actual screenplay while you were talking.
Yeah, but what if I was wrong? I mean, it's purely speculative.
Who cares if they correlate or not? What the hell would have hurt to ask?
Alright, you have a point. Anyway, enough from us. Let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with you shortly.
Our show promo is not a commercial break, Poxy.
Oh, well, Carson got to say it. I want to fucking say it.
People actually like Johnny Carson.
Well, I used to actually like you too, Reagan.
More than I can say for you, old man.
Oh.
And you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Miss Ragan here with Poxy Leonard, and when we return, director Penelope Spheeris will join us on the air to revisit her 1984 cult classic, Suburbia.
Stay tuned, wall crawlers. Want to be in the know for all things Ghost of Hollywood? Check out our website at theghostofhollywood.com for all the newest episodes and updates.
And don't forget to listen every other Friday live on KBOO 90.7 FM Portland. If you're not local, you can also find us live on kboo.fm. And while you're there, please consider donating to Portland's very own listener-powered radio.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and we are speaking with director Penelope Spheeris about her work on the cult classic Suburbia. How are you this morning, Penelope?
Oh, I'm actually excellent. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, we're doing all right, you know. Waking up, starting to... There's no sunlight up here this time of year, so it's just dark all the time, so...
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Sounds like my mood.
Oh, well, that's... Are you in a dark mood today? Here we go. All right. So, now, Ragan, you want to open up? You wanted to start it. What's up?
Yep. All right. Let's pick up in 1981. You had just worked through the first decline, and the LA punk community is on high. But at some point, this landscape begins to tell a story in your mind, and that is Suburbia. When did you begin to put pen to paper?
I actually had to make a narrative version, you would say, of the decline because I couldn't get the first decline distributed. And all the theater owners said, if you really want to make a movie about punk rock, then you're going to have to write a narrative script. So I sat down and I wrote Suburbia starting in around 1982. And yeah, by the way, I was shooting the first decline in 79 and 80, and then they picked it, or they released it in 81. But yeah, so started Suburbia around 82.
How long did you actually work through the screenplay? Were you just kind of working on it all the way up until the time it came down to production, or at what point did you get the treatment to start getting ready to pitch the idea?
Well, I had the script done, and that's when I met one of the producers, and he really liked the script. And then I should say financiers.
You talking about Burt Dragan?
And because that guy had never produced a movie before. And, you know, I had to rewrite it when we met the second financier / producer, which was Roger Corman. So we had to do a bunch of rewrites to make Roger happy because, you know, Roger was like the B movie king. And he had this formula that I always worked for him. So he wanted me to follow that formula. Yeah.
Now, with that, like, how did Burt Dragan feel about it? Was he cool with the original screenplay? And then how did he feel about the adaptations that Roger had you make? And did it take you a long time to rework in those scenes, or did you just kind of fill them in where you felt he needed it or wanted it?
Well, let's put it this way. Once I figured out that we had $250,000 from Burt and $250,000 from Roger, I wrote real fast. I'm like, I'm going to write this thing and finish it and do it whatever they're telling me before they change their mind. So, you know, it didn't take too long to do the adaptations. And Burt was fine with the original script, but, you know, Burt never did a movie before, so he was just learning. But Roger is the one that put all the demands on it. And I tried to follow it, you know, whatever he wanted, you know.
So with Decline, now that your interest in punk culture picked up to that and becoming a narrative director and working that into Suburbia, where were your other inspirations outside of punk culture that would, you know, inspire the screenplay, like the story itself? What personally did you put into that?
Well, I had a lot of friends, punk friends back then before I did Decline and before I did Suburbia. And I had, you know, heard stories and seen portions of their lives. And I just kind of borrowed from those situations. For example, the scene where Sheila dies from on purpose drug overdose, and the kids take her back to her parents' house. That happened to Darby Crash's brother. Before Darby died, his mother, Faith Baker, had already lost a son to drug overdose, and the kids just brought him home and put him in the front seat of her car. So that's where I got that idea from, which is kind of pathetic, but...
Well, why do you think it's pathetic? I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, because, you know, Darby Crash himself became such, you know, a central component of the punk community and history, and you largely put him there when it comes to the visuals with Decline. So why do you feel like it's pathetic?
Well, I mean, it was pathetic just to go to a funeral once Darby passed away, and sit there with his mom while she was in such torture, you know.
Oh, okay, I'm understanding.
That's why I say pathetic. But I borrowed stories from various of my friends. I had another friend who his mom left because his dad told her that he was gay. And then the kid didn't get along with the second dad. And so he took off, you know, and that was the role that was Joe Schmo in Suburbia played. And then, of course, I also, you guys took a lot of the threads of the story from my own life. You know, if you see the mom throwing the vodka bottle over the head of Evan while he's sitting watching TV, well, that was my mom.
Well, that's what you had talked a lot about, like physical abuse in previous interviews had been a component of your childhood, not sexual abuse, but physical abuse. So that's where that factors in.
Yeah, and I was there were 4 kids in my family, and I was put in charge of all the kids, which I didn't like to do because I was like the cop, you know. And but later I realized what a great education that was, because when I walk on a movie set, I'm able to control all the kids, you know.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you know, and I know people have made the stretch. The only Little Rascals stretch out comparison I have is, was it easier to work with punk teenagers or young children?
Oh,
who was easier to direct?
It was, you know, honestly, it was Poxy. It was different. Working with, there's one thing they did have in common, and that's a great question you ask. And the one thing that they had in common is that neither one of them were trained to do their acting in front of cameras. And so there's certain things that you have to do, like match your actions from take to take and hit your line or hit your mark on the floor when you're going to talk or speak without looking down at it. You know, like if you watch The President now, I love them both, but you watch them, they both look down and try to find the line on the floor where they're supposed to hit for the camera, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Only I noticed that.
They kind of got the Brando thing going on. They're looking off at the wall for a second, looking for the line.
Yeah, well, he used to hold a piece of paper in his hand down below, his frame and read because he couldn't remember his lines. But
well, I like, not to digress too much, but it's funny you said, because, at the end of The Little Rascals, I remember as a kid with all the outtakes, and you show a lot of the cute outtakes and the cuts of, like, trying to get the kids to not look at the camera and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny remembering that now. Now, back to Suburbia. I know we talked a little bit about financing, but when you got New World Pictures involved, did you approach Roger Corman? Did he approach you? How did all this kind of transpire in more detail?
Well, my sister worked for Roger as a set decorator, and she might have been the one that suggested that I go to him. I don't quite remember, but anyway, their budgets were so skinny that that my sister as a set decorator used to have to drive around the alleys in Venice, California, looking for mattresses so the stuntmen could land on them, they didn't have money in their budgets, but I don't know. I tell you what I do remember is walking out of Roger's office on San Vicente and looking up in the sky going, thank you, God, I know I'm going to make this movie. I just knew it, you know when it's going to work. And so I was just really happy that I had a good meeting with him. But if you walk in the door with $250,000 and put it on the table, Roger Corman is going to figure out something to do with it. And thank God he allowed me to do Suburbia.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you basically come in and you put, you say you bring your half to the line, and he meets you the other way. I know that he wasn't too interested in punks and at the time, but you had also mentioned too in like a previous interview, you had brought like the revelation of rap to him later. You just said he just kind of wasn't like culturally with a lot of things at that point.
Yeah, I did. But on the subject of punk, I'll tell you this, that nobody knew. It wasn't just Roger that didn't know what punk rock was. Nobody knew, and even, Jeff Prettyman that financed the first Decline, he didn't know what punk rock was. I just dragged him down to some shows and bought him a couple of beers and says, "Ain't this freaky? Let's put some money in." And he did it. But yeah, nobody back then knew what punk was. It was so radically different that everybody, or let's put it this way, most people were actually afraid of it.
And he was like changing a lot too right then, you know, like that's what's kind of unique about Decline. I always felt like when I read We Got the Neutron Bomb, that book Brendan Mullen wrote years ago, and they talk about some things in that, but the transition, at least obviously I wasn't there, but the transition from like the earlier days with like the Germs and the bands that were playing in the Mask, as opposed to like earlier TSOL's Vicious Circle and those bands coming up that brought a lot more energy, that kind of put some contention in the punk scene itself. So you really kind of captured like this transitional period where, you know, it really was like at war with itself. It was also evolving. So I could see how the punk or the public could be confused by something like that, I guess.
Yeah, and it was evolving. That's a really good word to use because, I mean, if I had to go back and knowing what I know now, I would have shot different bands for the first Decline. Like, I don't really classify X as a punk band. You know, they were around during that whole punk scene, but they were more of a kind of melodic, sing-songy, kind of not too aggressive, different kind of music than punk rock. Punk rock was in your face, you know?
Yeah, that is true, you know, and I know that, like, who worked with Ray Manzarek? Some of them worked with Ray Manzarek.
I would say Jim Morrison.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, some of them, I mean, like, in production, like, in like, he produced some of that
I think
stuff.
he produced one of their albums, and, you know, so you got keyboards coming out your ass.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I was around when Ray was working with them, and I think that was Bob's Big's idea to cast him as I don't know if he was producer, engineer, or just played keys on the album, but probably all three. But you know, Bob had freaky ideas, you know, and he back then Bob Biggs liked Tony Bennett, and I kept saying, "Why the hell do you like Tony Bennett, man? You're into punk rock. What are you doing?" You know. But now look at Tony Bennett. Isn't that Gaga loves him, and everybody loves Tony Bennett. So, you know, and you know, Bob passed away last October. Geez, it's been a year. Wow. And everybody called me because I was with him as his girlfriend for 7 years during that whole Decline and /record/magazine time. And, you know, it was in a very, very interesting time, but, you know, it was not a good relationship. They called me from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and said, "We need a photo of Bob for the show. So could you, because we're going to put it, you know, in the in memoriam section, could you send us a photo of Bob?" And I told him, I said, "Well, I had a bunch, but I threw darts at him and then I burned them, so I don't have them anymore."
Nice. You should have sent him. You should have sent him the pictures with the darts. I think it would have given him like historical clarity.
You know, it was that's a whole nother story being his girlfriend during that time, because you know there was too much coke flying around, too much booze. Everybody was messed up all the time. It was, you know, it was a difficult time in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I've only read the books, but it L.A. between 80 to 84 sounds wild.
And I wouldn't take those books as the honest to God truth either. God bless Brendan Mullen. He came to see me before he passed away. But yeah, there's a lot of BS in there too, if you ask me. I mean, music, if you look at the beginning of rock and roll, has always been evolving. So if you look, you can see the decades, each decade, starting from the 50s, when Elvis, you know, sort of started rock and roll. You know, there's been different waves, different kinds of music, you know. I mean, the 90s was grunge, around where you guys are from. And then, you know, the 70s and 80s were sort of disco for normal people and punk rock for us, you know. But it does just keep evolving, you know.
Well, Ragan, go ahead. I think you were going to ask about Suburbia. I know we digressed. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, what did we say? So was the question who was easier to handle, the real punks or the little kids? Are we still on that question? Because
I don't know. I mean, we diverted, but if you want, you got to answer though. Yeah, if you're going to give a clarify
like
the
I
answer,
said,
I want to know.
Neither one of them understood the technicalities of being an actor on camera. or even on stage, you know. So we had to teach them that, like with the Little Rascals, we had to hold their feet down underneath the frame so they wouldn't like just walk away while we were filming them, you know.
Oh yeah, I bet like how were the tutu scenes? That's the last question I'll ask.
Oh, the tutu?
Yes.
You know what's a trip is after we did that scene, I got all these hate letters from gay groups that were criticizing me for putting those boys in the tutus. And, you know, it's like, it wasn't my idea. They kind of had that in the original series, guys. Let's like lighten up, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Call Hal Roach's corpse.
Yeah, right?
So,
yeah.
Did you have any difficulty like pitching the concept for the movie to them?
Well, no, like I said, once I came in the door with half the money, it was like, okay, we're going to make this movie. And then Roger wanted me to make a bunch of changes. Like he wanted more sex and violence in the movie. And I think if I would have done the movie as the original script, there wouldn't have been that. I don't really like making violent movies.
Yeah.
I'm sort of sorry I did the Boys Next Door, to be honest with you, with Charlie Sheen back in the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I am. I'm sorry I did that because I feel that when we make movies that are packed with guns and violence and explosions and car races that kill people, come on, you're just putting more of it into the world and you're making it normal activity for human beings to do these things. And so I would never do a movie like that. And I'm sorry I did The Boys Next Door. Yeah.
I could see that where you're talking about the propagation of that, because like in the beginning, especially with the serial killers, like, you know, it talks about each serial killer comes up. But I do think, you know, for a little fly-by flick, to give you credit in the fact that you had Charlie Sheen's kind of play. I know Martin Sheen was a crazy one in Badlands, but it was kind of interesting to have an 80s formula of that. And I thought it was unique in its own thing. I mean, if it would have been the 70s, it was like a perfect little drive-in movie. I just thought it was a cool little fly-by movie, but I do understand what you mean about that.
Well, I didn't want it to promote violence, you know, and it's funny because Martin Sheen was sitting behind Charlie and me when we had the first screening out in Santa Monica, and during the first violent scene, Martin stood up and said something like, "This is bullshit, I'm out of here. I don't want my son doing movies like this." Well, Charlie looks at me and he goes, "What the hell is he talking about? He just did Badlands," you know?
You know, it's funny that you say that you regret it, though, because I know that you've mentioned John Cassavetes as an influence, and it's very Cassavetes of you to say that you know, he always had an issue with that sort of exploitation in movies and was very focused on love. So I feel like you're channeling him a little bit here with that.
Well,
I see that.
You know, I'm good at doing that stuff because when I did Hollywood Vice Squad, I learned how to roll a car and, you know, shoot a gun and blow up a blood squib. And, you know, I learned how to do all that technical on-set special effects stuff, but I don't want to do it, you know? And also I'm not good at love stories for some reason. I think because I've never had a good one. But I'm not good at love stories either. You know, you got to do what you're good at, you know?
Well, I mean, it seems lately, like down the road, it became more of a transition into comedy as you got more into like commercial productions and stuff.
Yeah, I never really meant to do comedies. The fact of the matter is, you guys, if I would have had my way about my life as a film director, I would have continued to make social comment movies like Suburbia. Suburbia, to me, and The Decline Part 3 are my two favorite movies that I've done. And if I could have made those kind of movies through my whole life, I sure would die a happier lady. But I would be poor. You know, I didn't want to do those comedies. I didn't want to, you know, do Black Sheep. They didn't have a script when they approached me, you know.
They didn't even have a script for Black Sheep when they approached you?
No, Sherry Lansing called me up on a Sunday and said, we've got to exercise our option on Chris Farley by 9:00 tomorrow morning, or he's going to go do Cable Guy, because they had a, clause in the contract from Tommy Boy that he had to do another movie at Paramount by such and such a time. So she called me up. She goes, what, will you direct this movie? He wants to know who the director is. And I said, well, show me the script. She goes, we don't have a script. I'm like, oh my God, how am I supposed to do a movie? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. And she says, come on. She gets Goldwyn on the phone, John Goldwyn. And she goes, we'll pay you $2 million for your salary. And I just sat there stunned.
I'll write the script too. Why not?
That's a lot of coin.
Yeah, I know.
So I just sat there and didn't say anything. And John took that as a no. So he goes, okay, how about 275? So
best pause you ever made right there. Maybe. Like the best silence you ever had right there.
Yeah, I keep my mouth shut more often. But the fact is, and then once you establish yourself as making that kind of money, and that kind of picture, mind you, comedies, that's all they want you to do. Studio system only wants a woman to do one genre of picture. Now, guys, they can go do a war movie, they can do a love story, they can do an animated movie at Disney, just because that's what they let guys do. But women, you do Wayne's World and you're stuck in the comedy field,
So you just, once you got there, you felt like you had to stay. Kind of,
I couldn't get out.
Planted you in cement there.
I had a stack of scripts up to my knees with great stories that I should have been able to make. And, I'm not bitching because, a lot of my friends didn't get to make any movies at all, and they're fucking living in their cars,
Yeah.
Excuse my language.
No, you're fine.
So I'm not really complaining. I just wish I could have kept making movies like Suburbia.
Well, like with Suburbia,
was it ever difficult? Like a contention to write in these violent scenes, like these scenes containing sex and violence?
Well, I didn't want to do that. Roger just said every 10 minutes you need either some sex or some violence. So that's why in the beginning of the movie, the little kid standing out by the phone booth gets attacked by the guard dog. And by the way, the guard dog story is an actual real story that happened out in, See, I'm from OC. I'm from Orange County, or when I went to high school there. And, I read, while I was working as a waitress, I read a story about this guard dog company that just let these dogs loose when they went out of business, and there was these wild dogs running around and they were dangerous.
Well, during the production, did I guess the dogs were trained, I suppose? How did that work out when you were actually shooting those sequences?
I have to tell you, I would never do that today. My daughter, Anna Fox, is a avid dog rescuer. She's probably rescued thousands of dogs. She works with the County of Los Angeles and a couple of private rescues. And, I would never do that scene today, just like I would never do The Boys Next Door today. But, Roger wanted some violence. So I figured out that scene and, like the girl getting her dress torn off in the punk concert, that doesn't happen. If somebody at a punk show started ripping a girl's dress off, let me tell you something.
Yeah, the punks would kick the shit out of them.
They would get their ass kicked, and first of all, she would not be wearing that dress at a punk show. You know what I mean?
How was it having to work that scene out with all of them and get them to do that?
Well,
when it came down to actually filming it.
They were getting paid and they were having lunch. So
they didn't care.
Yeah, they're just taking direction at that point. But I wasn't down for doing that kind of stuff, but to get the movie made. I mean, all through my career, it's been a real fine line walking between what I, as an artist, as a hopefully creative director, want to do, and what the studio or the executives or the dudes with the money want me to do. And I've got to really walk that line very carefully, and hopefully get my thoughts and feelings into the scenes and still keep them happy. Yeah.
Well, a lot of the issue that you would, in an interview, I think it was with Jane Root back in the 80s, I forget, who was the other director of it, was what, Slumber Party Massacre?
Amy.
And both of you.
Towns?
Yeah, and you're both on there at the time, but you talked about being frustrated also with the opening scene because you said it was really cheaply done. Now, of course, this was like 40 years ago, but you were saying at the time you just felt like it didn't even look good, that you would need probably upwards of like, a lot more money for production to make that scene work the way that you wanted to it effectively. Do you still feel that way about it there?
You're talking about the opening scene in Suburbia?
Yeah, the very opening scene. You just said you would even get rid of it if you could. Like,
yeah,
unless
I wanted to just ditch that scene because, we didn't really have, first of all, it was tagged on at the last minute when we were shooting. They said, okay, you gotta have something really scary, frightening, violent up front just to grab the audience and bring them into the story. I'm like, oh God. And so, let's kill a baby, and so we came up with the wild dog, which are explained later in the script. And, the prop department, like I said, the budgets were really, really thin. And we didn't really have, I've shot other scenes that have realistic looking babies in them, but it looked like a doll you bought in a thrift store, you know what I mean? And the dog is tearing it up. It's so embarrassing. Let's
talk about casting for a second then. Because I know that, that's obviously really fundamental to the movie, especially, I know that Chris Peterson's the name of the man that played Jack, correct?
Uh-huh.
And then of course there was Flea who was new to this at the time. And I know you've talked about meeting Flea at Lee Ving's house.
Yeah.
And when he was like 19, and you said you just thought he was just cute as hell with his little split in his teeth, and you thought you mentioned that sometimes, you said something unique about it that I want to bring up, is that you talked about the camera either likes you, it doesn't like you, it'll find you in different ways, etc. But you talk about it with Flea, it worked with him. So other than, I know you cast him, what was it like getting all of the punks together, working with some of the actors, and then some of the authenticity of just having people that largely weren't used to direction or taking direction?
I have to shoot video on characters that are going to play together in a scene to make sure that the chemistry is right, because you can rehearse them in a room, or most people can just rehearse them in a room and say, okay, this works or it doesn't work. Not me. I have to watch them on camera because the camera sees things differently than we do. And like you said, either the camera, I always say the camera either loves you or doesn't. And when it doesn't, I can tell immediately. I can also tell, I believe I can, when a person is funny or not,
No, I would think you have a good eye for that.
Yeah, well, Woody Allen said either you're funny or you're not. And that means, that sounds really, simple, but it's actually profound, because some people think they're funny and they act funny and they do all this weird stuff that's supposed to be funny, but guess what? They're not funny. I feel like when I get these guys on camera and girls, I see that I put them together, and whatever the chemistry is, I can tell immediately if someone works with the chemistry and if somebody is funny or not,
Do you feel that adding this authenticity is what substantiates Suburbia's credibility as a lasting fundamental component in the punk community?
I think, what Flea told me, that the Chili Peppers go around the world and perform. And he says wherever he goes that there's punks, and they refer to Suburbia as the punk rock Bible. And so when you ask about, authenticity, well, I guess I nailed it, because the punks still today can relate to it, and young people today all across the world, even though it was never really translated into other languages that I'm aware of, punks watch this movie and can relate to it. And it's just got some kind of lasting value. I don't know what it is, but same thing as with Wayne's World. When I did that one, there's a lasting value to it, And it makes a difference that it can live this long, especially in a playground where there's so much material out there now.
And it's funny the way, like, I'll say it because, but like, punk's always been a huge component of my life. And first seeing Suburbia, especially with a lot of other kids at like 14 and 15 who are all younger punks too, it really did have a big impact on us. However you took away from it, I think that it's what about its authenticity to like viewing it from the outside was that, when you're really young, it kind of, you're not quite there with the punk community yet to where you're like out and about seeing a lot of that stuff at 13 and 14. So it kind of gives you an idea of where you're going, what's happening,
Right.
And it also gives you a sense of history now. Like to us, seeing this like in the early aughts, it was a sense of history. It was seeing where we came from. It was seeing how things had happened before. And,
Right.
in the honest depiction of that allowed us to see it from like a very accurate point of view. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of Hollywood movies about punks and things like that are poor depictions, but
God, are they bad?
really bad. And they get worse as the years go.
Yeah.
So, like what about Bill Coyne? When you cast him, because he's a major player in the movie. What's his history casting him? Because he didn't do too much after that.
Well, he wasn't necessarily one of the hardcore punks that were cast that were always at the shows, but I needed a kid that was like Mr. Average, and that's why I chose him. I don't mean that as an insult.
Yeah.
I just mean it as I needed somebody that was just more of a regular kid than a punk rocker. So, but I don't even remember how we met him, but he sure did a good job, I think, and that poor little boy that got his hair cut all the time.
And what was that like casting him? Were his parents involved? What's the story behind him? Because he's like one of the first young children you worked with.
Yeah, you have to have parents on the set. When you're shooting, you have to have the parents on the set, but the poor kid through the whole thing, I mean, it was like stressful for him because we were flying by the seat of our pants going as fast as we can, and this kid is like, okay, go over there, get on the bike, do this, do that, do this. And he got a little stressed out, and when the day that we were going to cut his hair into a mohawk, he kind of had a little nervous breakdown. They were in the makeup trailer and shaving the sides of his head so they can get that mohawk to stick up, and the poor kid was just crying like all heck, and I felt so bad for him, but we had to go through with it. I used to carry on the Little Rascals and probably on Suburbia as well. I used to carry a wad of $1 bills in my pocket. And whenever I had a problem, I would just bribe them, just
that. All right, back on Little Rascals for a second. That totally changes my perspective on that. I got a dollar scene with the pickle and the dollar.
I made up that song. I'm the one. I did, and I knew we needed to have some time pass. I didn't know how to do it. I'm standing there, and while I'm standing there, I'm like, okay, you guys. I got a pickle. You got a pickle. I got a dollar. Ha, 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 ha. I made that song up on the spot. And I want my royalties. No,
that shit changed lives right there. Okay, I'm not kidding.
My favorite line from the Little Rascals is Buckwheat when he says, quick, what's the number for 911?
I don't know. 911.
Yeah, there we go.
I remember. I love that part.
Now, back to Suburbia. We definitely can't talk about it without mentioning the music. DI, TSOL, and the Vandals. How did these groups become involved in Suburbia, and did you ever consider anyone else?
Well, as Poxy was saying, there was a time when the music changed from that original hardcore punk scene, and it started evolving into bands like TSOL, which are much more melodic and assertive, but not aggressive, And so those were the bands that really were just popular at the clubs at that time. And that's how I chose them. Yeah.
When the girls jump up and attack Jack Grisham on stage, was that staged? Was that part of the script?
I'm going to say that was me saying, why don't you go up there and grab it his, little phony tuxedo. Go ahead, get it. Jack's a good guy.
Now, did you, because, one thing that I'm curious about as I get more into like learning about cameras and stuff. So the approach to shooting the sequences in Suburbia. You know, you've already done Decline. Did you shoot Decline all on broadcast camera, and was Suburbia shot? I know you shot the Suburbia on the Airy, but what was the different? Did you have any different approach, or was there like something that you had kind of gotten used to at that point as far as doing this? Because you had a lot of work in music videos with Rock and Reel and stuff like that prior to this as well.
Yeah, I did Rock and Reel as a just a way to make a living, and it was before music videos, and I was getting all the music videos in town because there was no other companies doing that, you know. And but I was shooting 16 millimeter film at that point, and then when we shot the Decline, I was shooting 16 millimeter. But when we shot Suburbia, we got Tim Sherstead, the cinematographer, you know, was able to squeeze 35 millimeter into the budget. And you're going to love this, because we couldn't shoot, you can't shoot film like you can shoot video, because you can just keep rolling on video. I mean, when you got to turn your camera down to the ground, you leave it rolling, you know?
Yeah.
But we had to, with Suburbia, we had the 35 millimeter, and you could only take just, you know, a few short takes, and the kids didn't always match their action. So I got these cockroaches. I had a cockroach wrangler, and he would bring cockroaches in like a big gulp cup.
So that story's that legend's true too. I was going to ask you about that.
Go ahead, yeah, and we would let the cockroaches go, and then we'd have to wait for the guy to catch them. And then one day, because I wanted to be able to cut away to something when the kids didn't match their action, and every first time director needs to have a cockroach shot, you know, just to match, because nobody can always get it right.
Where did you find a cockroach wrangler?
Huh?
With the cockroach wrangler, I wonder how that works.
I don't know, man. It was just like some dude with a bunch of cockroaches. You know, one day we told him, oh, there's a scene where Jack Diddley, played by Chris Pedersen, had to smash a cockroach with his hand, and the guy goes, "You can't smash. No way can you kill one of my cockroaches." I'm like, dude, it's a cockroach. Okay, that's what they're for. You kill them. And it's like, no. Okay, $50. And okay, we'll pay you $50 to kill a cockroach.
that is the most expensive fucking cockroach in the history of everything. Don't
you think that was a very pricey bug? It's like, you know, when we're done with the movie, just give me the whole damn cup and I'll get rid of all of them. Watch me.
No. With the show sequences again, and you know it's funny because with how did you end up working with them in Suburbia, and then why again with Dudes? Because their career was kind of starting to accelerate again around the time that you did Dudes as well.
Oh well, Steve was a friend of mine. You know, I just kind of like to work with my friends. Keith Morris was a friend of mine, and I always still to this day do whatever I can to help out Keith, and you know, he does the same for me. And it's just, you know, long-term relationships you have with people, you know. Lee Ving was kind of a pain in the ass in Dudes, though, because somebody told him there was asbestos in the location we were shooting in, and he refused to go into the building and shoot the ending of the movie. And I'm like outside his trailer door banging on it going, dude, please come out and finish the movie, please. And then we had to dress up some guy to look like Lee Ving, which ain't easy, and shoot, you know, a stand-in that was supposed to be Lee Ving. And then he came back for one half of a day. We got him to come back.
So he never actually went in then. He refused to all the way to the floor. He just never did.
Well, he was in there for a while, and then some crew member said, I bet you there's asbestos in that there old building. And so after that, Lee said, I'm not going in there. And we had to shoot like 2-3 more days in there using this guy dressed up as Lee Ving, and, you know, shoot him in shadow, shoot him in silhouette, shoot him in wide shot, and kind of fake it. And then at the last day, I begged him to come back so I could have the real Lee Ving. You know?
Who was the easiest band to work with in Suburbia of the three of them? Was that all shot in one night? And it looks that way, but I've never been sure. It was all shot in one night and you just separated it?
Shit, man, I can't remember what happened yesterday. How do I know? I don't know. I don't remember where we shot. Oh, I know we shot one of them down at the A&M stage, and I think that. And I know when we shot Dudes, we threw John Cryer and Dan Roebuck into the pit, and they got the shit kicked out of them, and and they go. Dan goes, how come you did that, man? I mean, come on, I'm an actor. I'm not like a, punk that can survive this stuff. And John Cryer was like, yeah, give me more. That was fun.
You and John Cryer worked together pretty well on that, didn't you? I mean, it seems like
John Cryer is a prince. I mean, you guys, I don't even have enough words to say how wonderful this guy is as an actor and as a person and as a dad and a family man, all that. He's so cool.
Well, you know a lot of punks are a part of the community pretty early on. And because of this, was there a lot of pressure on you to capture this lifestyle accurately and honestly in Suburbia?
Not really, not a lot of pressure. The pressure was to keep the executives and financiers away so I could capture the lifestyle. Like with Suburbia, I would have never had that scene where the kids go around stealing out of garages. They didn't do that. That wasn't real. But I had to have something every 10 minutes to make Roger happy. And you know what? When we finished the movie, he goes, we got to change the title. Suburbia is not a word that the general public understands. And I'm like, oh my God. He says, we're going to call it The Wild Side. And I said, that's stupid. Come on. It just sounds like one of your exploitation. He did The Wild Angels and The Wild this and that. It's like The Wild Side. No, I don't want to do that. So I had to argue with him. And he goes, I'm going to have one of my assistants go down to the shopping mall and we're going to take a poll with just kids walking around. And we're going to say, what movie would you like to go see, Suburbia or The Wild Side? And it came back, everybody wanted to see The Wild Side. So Roger's like, so see, I'm right. It's The Wild Side. I said, okay, well, I'm out. You want some publicity for the movie? I'm out. I ain't doing it. But then that guy, Richard Linklater, went and did another movie called Suburbia. It's like, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that one sucked.
Like, let's go make Gone with the Wind. You know what I mean? It's like, find your own title, dude.
Well, later, in the Rebel Streets and the Wild Side names, I'd read about that. Like, were there foreign releases of it and it came out under those names?
No, but he made up posters and everything trying to convince me that The Wild Side would be the right title. But it's not about that. It's about how boring Suburbia is. And for me, growing up in suburban Orange County, where the oldest store or building in general is a 7-Eleven, there's no history, and when you don't have any history, you don't know who the hell you are, and you're just kind of floating around. And so I wanted it to be a social statement about how really, really bored kids handle this vapid situation. And because I had to handle it, I'm growing up in Orange County working at Denny's and the snack shop and IHOP, and it's like, man, I know there's something better out there. I know I can find something better. And that was the same thing that Dave Grohl said. He told me when he was doing the voiceover for the Decline DVDs. He said, he's from Virginia or someplace, and he goes, yeah, man, I knew there was something better out there. And look what he did,
Oh, yeah, that's true. I forget because I'm originally from Virginia, but Dave Grohl was in Scream. Like, he kind of did the same thing Henry Rollins did. Like, kind of like went left, headed to the West Coast at some point.
Yeah. And when Henry first came out here, you might be interested to know that he, had replaced, I guess, I don't know, was it Ron or Dez or somebody?
Yeah, I think Ron had left, and then Dez was kind of filling in, and they were trying to find a singer.
Right.
In the place. Yeah.
And so then Henry was just starting up with Black Flag, and he came up to my office because I asked him to, and I said, look, read the script. You would be fantastic as the lead character, Jack Diddley. Please do it. And he read it and he said, I can't do it. And I said, what do you mean you can't do it, man? To think about how great it would be, have a lead in a movie. Think about it. Can't do it. So for years, I was mad at Henry for not doing that. I mean, Chris Pedersen did a great job, but, you know,
just think he would have fit better?
I think so, yeah. But years later, I did Henry's talk show, and he told me and in the world that Black Flag, probably namely Greg Ginn, was telling him if he did the movie that he couldn't be in Black Flag, and that's why he didn't do it.
Oh, really?
Oh, why didn't you tell me that at the time, and I wouldn't have been pissed at you for 30 years?
You were pissed at it for 30. So, like, you all didn't really make up until that radio show, or the one that, or what's the show you did? You talked about greatest albums.
Well,
and
it's
stuff.
not like we were fighting. I would see him places and say hello. You know, he's a good dude, but
you were like, you were great in Jack Frost as a hockey coach, Henry.
I had a little chip on my shoulder about it, but then once he explained it, I felt bad for him, you know, because I know what Black Flag is like. It's like, do it our way or the highway, you know.
Oh yeah, that's true. I mean, you captured Black Flag really early on with Decline. I mean,
yeah, I was lucky on that one. I was lucky on a lot of stuff, you know. Seriously, I always think I don't know how I had any success at all. I think that, and then I think, all the people in my life that have died, and they are helping me from the afterlife, if you can believe that. I think that sometimes. Can you imagine? Because I can't. I go, why did I have this success? And then the other side of the coin is, how come I couldn't do the real movies I wanted to do? You know?
Well, so you're talking like there's some things now you're revisiting and wondering why. You're looking back. You have things that you wish you would have done as opposed to what you did. Is that what you're going?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I would so much rather have done, well, I'm not going to say the titles because people will steal them, but there's some movies I wrote about the metal scene in the 80s. There's some movies I wrote about, the current punk scene, dramatic pieces about squatter kids. You know, I've written a lot of movies that I couldn't get made just because I did Wayne's World, and nobody wants to finance a serious movie that, is directed by a Wayne's World director, you know.
How is it being viewed as a director who had early on a pretty like serious independent narrative focus, and then when you made the...
They don't care about that, you know, because they didn't make any money. Those movies didn't make any money.
Yeah.
You know, Suburbia never made any money, and neither did the Decline movies. They only survived because of people like you guys.
With the transition, you know, because in those earlier films, they're so atmospheric, you know, like especially with Suburbia. So like, what is a particular atmosphere you had in mind? I mean, obviously, like the tract housing comes up a lot, you know, and that's used throughout the film. That whole thing was, how did you get out there? When did the location and everything set base?
Well, that situation was such that, I used to always go out and visit my mom, who still lived in Orange County, and I actually was driving by that portion of Downey is the city that it was in. We used to always call it Downer. And it, you know, I looked at that and I thought, God, what a mess, you know, and the government had exercised their right to do eminent domain and confiscate the houses from the people that lived in there because they were going to put a freeway through there. But then they never put the freeway through there and everybody lost their house. I mean, you know, hello, government, doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how... And then I had to, Bert was actually, the producer was actually really good at negotiating with the utility companies. Oh, we have to bring in a pole and some electricity, and you know those scenes where the kids are in the kitchen and there's all that food around that they stole in the garages and everything. Well, we couldn't afford phony food because they have that in prop shops, you know. But all that food was sitting in there for like 2 weeks getting rotten. So everything stinked in there.
So it probably turned in. it looks like a real squad house. I mean, like when I grew up, like we spent time in places that mirrored that. And I read, every time I watch it, I read the walls. Like as a 15-year-old kid reading Motorhead Sucks, I think I was like, you know, until you get a little older to think about it. It has like what was I watching the other night? I feel like it was in one of your films, and it was in decline, and it said above the black flag, it says "Remember the Altamont." So like the shit on the walls just tells so many fucking stories.
Right? Yeah. Well, you know, I think it's even in the first decline. Is I ask because when I first started going to Black Flag shows, I didn't know that Black Flag meant anarchy. You know, I didn't know that. And so I think in the first decline, I asked Greg Ginn, and he just sits there with his deadpan, you know, look on his face and goes, it means anarchy.
Yeah, that's, you know, it's, I'm trying to think, like aside from the opening, I had another question on decline I wanted to ask you. Oh yeah, the posters again, like with the walls, you know, like last night when I was showing one of my sons was, and I was cooking dinner, and I had declined the first one on, and he asked me when you're interviewing Darby, he says, "Who's Sham 69, Dad?" And so I was like, "Well, all right." But it's funny.
That's on the.
But it's, I mean, but that's like, you know,
yeah.
Sham 69 at that point is going through a totally different transition themselves, and they're kind of like a thing in the community, you know, like where they would have been more contemporaries as to where we see them differently now.
Yeah, and then they had that poster must be so valuable today, where Sid Vicious was it goes to jail or dies or whatever.
Oh yeah, I'm charged with murder right behind him when he's sitting at the table.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Anyway, people collect that stuff now. You know, I should dig through my vaults because I got all kinds of stuff, but you know, it's too depressing. I barely could get all the crap together to put the decline box sets together. I don't like looking backwards.
Yeah, I understand. I know you said that on Mark Maron's podcast. You were talking, and you said that Anna helped you push through a lot, get through a lot of that stuff because. Yeah,
and this guy at the Mark Toscano at the Academy of Motion Pictures Archive, he's the one that helped us both. Yeah.
Well, on Suburbia, aside from the opening scene in the film and some of the other sections that we've talked about, what the other way around? What are things that you had to abandon or were compromised because of either like time, financial constraints, whatever? What were some ideas that you had that didn't make it into the movie?
Honestly, what happened was I was able to finesse the scenes that I had written so that they would be accepted by Roger and Bert. There were things added, but there weren't things that were deleted necessarily, no.
Well, what was the transition like shooting musical performances and documentaries to shooting feature films for the cinema?
Well, the first time they brought me to the set of Wayne's World, because that's when I joined the studio system, you know, they gave me a driver. I never had a driver before, and Wayne's World was my 7th film. The other ones had all been either documentaries or low budget pieces. But when the Teamster's driving and he pulls up to the set and it's like all these trucks and, you know, I'm like, wait a minute, why are all these people here? We don't need that many people, you know. And there, you know, it must have been 20 trucks and 100-person crew because that's the way the unions demand it, you know. And so it was a big transition just in terms of having to wrangle all those people, you know. Instead of having to deal with 20 people, I had to deal with 100 people, and they're all asking you questions. So it was a big transition. And then I got spoiled. You know, I started out as, I don't need all these trucks, and then and then it turned into, you know, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. When you get to the height of the, you know, those successful studio comedies, you get a little spoiled. And I don't like myself for being that way. And that's why when I worked on Senseless with the Weinsteins and it was total misery, I decided I didn't want to be in the studio system anymore, and went and did the Decline Part 3 about gutter punks. It was like, yeah, I just got to get away from all this money shit and luxury and go back to who I really am, you know?
How did going back to Decline 3, how was that for you personally? What was the transition out of the studio system to being able to doing what you wanted to do again?
It changed my life because I was not happy in the studio system. I was making shitloads of money, but money doesn't make you happy, you know? Being with good people and being with your family and that sort of thing makes you happy, not money. All the people I know that have a lot of money, they're so unhappy. And I say that to people and they go, "Oh, try me." Well, no, just believe me, please, because all it does is cause more trouble, you know? I'd rather be poor, to be honest with you.
Well, I know you've previously mentioned that Frederick Wiseman's documentary work as a filmmaker had a very big influence on you. How did that carry over into Suburbia?
It's like apples and oranges, honestly. You know, Weisman was brilliant because he was shooting at a time, and I know he recently shot some 5-hour movie or whatever, but back in the day when he was doing like his primo work, he was awesome because he would be objective instead of saying like Michael Moore does. Instead of saying, "Here's what I believe, I'd like to shove it up your ass," you know, he says, "Here is what we have. I will give it to you objectively. You just decide what you think about it." And that's what I liked about Weisman, is that he didn't impose his own standards and values on the viewer.
Well, maybe that's what makes Suburbia authentic in a way. Maybe it's that you're not trying to propagate I mean, I know you had some exploitative stuff going on there, but largely you're not trying to do anything other than depict the reality that people aren't seeing. You know, the thing that you might read in the news or you might see passing by in the streets, but you can kind of, maybe you don't have to empathize exactly, but you're getting a little more of, you're gaining an understanding of it. And with any kind of understanding of a culture, you usually start to feel better about things, you know, and more involved.
Yeah, I didn't want to make a movie with The Decline or Suburbia that said, "Hey, aren't punks cool? Why don't you like us? Come on." I didn't want to make that movie. I wanted to make the movie that said, "Here it is. If you're too chicken shit to go to a club and see it yourself, you can watch it in the movie. And if you like it, fine. And if you don't like it, fine." But I'm not going to put my own, you know, I never tried to say, "Here, take this. It's wonderful because I did it." You know, please. I just wanted to present it the way it was, you know. And I think that's what you were talking about, Poxy.
Yeah.
And who came up with the name Ghost of Hollywood?
Oh, all right, so that's got a story. You might like this one. All right, I'll tell you the story. Now you've asked me the question, so this is going to be the origin story for it. Now, when before I was born, in Roanoke, Virginia, there was an old club, and my dad, neither of my parents are punk, but for some reason they wound up at this club called the Ghost of Hollywood. It was originally been called the Iroquois, all kinds of different places.
They got lost and ended up there.
Yeah, well, yeah, they somehow go there, right? And this local band, Luke Puke and the Vomits, play, and they were like the local G.G. Allen, right? And so,
whoa,
yeah, well, but years later, you know, as a teenager, my mom had told me about this because she dropped me off there for punk gigs. I like saw, you know, the Skeptics there, a bunch of different bands over the years. It was like the local hangout in Roanoke. When it died, it was called the Factory 324 years later. And when it died, like the whole community died there and everybody started going to Richmond, Virginia for gigs. But that is where the name The Ghost of Hollywood came from. When I was thinking of a name for the show, I had a silly name, like, I don't remember what it was. And another guy who was working on writing the program was like, I don't know about that. So I sat around and I was like, what about the Ghost of Hollywood? All right, we'll go with that. So that's where we are.
It's really good. It's really a good title because for me, personally, I can totally relate because in my mind, Hollywood doesn't exist anymore. But there is a ghost of Hollywood. And yes, your show is named that, but Hollywood is something of the past, and it's gone. And now it is, digital streaming and all sorts of content that is scattered all over the place, like somebody threw a bomb in a china shop. It's like so much crap that you can't find anything to focus on that is worthwhile. And that goes for music and movies, in my opinion. I know that sounds kind of negative, but I just feel fortunate that I was able to live through a time when music was defined by specific genres, and so were movies. And right now, everything is just homogenized and bastardized and misused and stolen, and pirated. And it's a big old mess out there. And to be honest with you, I have no desire to be a part of that scene. And like I said, Hollywood is dead, and you have a great name for your show, The Ghost of Hollywood.
I reading about the past with cinematic experience and stuff, I feel like it's definitely been diluted in the overall. I mean, we talked with Richard Haynes a while ago now, and he like,
is that the guy that made the underwear?
No, he was the one. He did Class of Nukem High and like Toxic Avenger and a bunch of like.
No, I'm joking.
Oh, okay, but I'm too serious. You got me there. I've been had, but so with but he talked a lot about like transitioning from film to digital and hating it. Do you feel the same way? Like as a filmmaker, actually going from like, because Suburbia, in a lot of the earlier films shot, like on the Arri film cameras, they're processed through deluxe. So you've got a very like desaturated look, you're coming out of the late 70s there. And a lot of that really kind of, it's captured in the independent filmmaking process. I feel like at that time that doesn't exist anymore so much. It's really, you get the environment. Do you feel like the digital kind of kill it for you?
It doesn't have to do with the technology as much as it has to do with the content evolving into pure crap. Okay. To me, because of the digital technology, and like they say, the good news is everybody can make a movie, and the bad news is that everybody can make a movie, So everybody's making a movie. Most of them don't know what the fuck they're doing, and the movies are not good. And I mean, every once in a while, somebody will call me or email me and say, "Oh, you got to see such and such." Yeah, I'll stumble across something if I take somebody's opinion about it. But who has time to sit there and go through all this just slew of crap that these streaming services are shitting out?
Oh yeah,
I don't care if they don't hire me. I really don't. I don't care anymore, Well,
I know that you've said that you don't even, like in previous interviews, you said you don't even really watch movies much anymore. Do you ever revisit like the old ones or are there old films that you might, if you were going to sit down and watch something, what would be worth your time?
I just sit and watch my boyfriend.
Hey, that's
I don't
the
watch
best way to
movies. I listen to old music, but I don't watch movies. I watch the news. I've seen every episode of 60 Minutes. Maybe sometime if there's some kind of special about mental illness or some sort of human behavior issues, I'll watch that. But I have no interest really, and I have no interest in making movies anymore. I mean, I did some interview lately, and it got the title "Hollywood Can Blow Me."
Oh.
Yeah, and it kind of went viral there for a while. People magazine picked it up because they ain't got nothing better to do. And I was like, I don't care. I had a nice time. I'm not ungrateful while I was there, except for when I worked with the Weinsteins. I had a pretty good time. But for the most part, Hollywood can blow me,
Well, Suburbia itself was shot in only 6 weeks, and that's pretty tight. Did this schedule ever threaten the production at all?
No, just in the fact that, like I was having to drive from Downey, where we were shooting, up to Hollywood, where I lived in Laurel Canyon, still do. And Anna, my daughter's in the movie, as you may know. She was about 12 or 13 then. And I fell asleep while I was on the freeway and ran off the freeway and ended up in a ditch. But other than things like that, we made it through okay. It wasn't like, oh my God, I didn't make my day, or the schedule is 5 days behind, you're fired as a director, I mean, when I was working on Hollywood Vice Squad, this producer was a whack job. His name is Sandy Howard. We were shooting in the Brown Derby, and I was shooting a scene, and all of a sudden I hear in the other room, action. I'm like, what the hell? That's what the director says.
He's calling
so I go
for
in
you?
the other room and I go, Sandy, what are you doing, man? He goes, I'm picking up our schedule because we're a little bit behind. So I'm directing this scene here. Now, that was like so humiliating in front of the rest of the crew to be told that as director, but I brought that movie in on schedule. I've never been behind or over budget on any of my movies, never been behind schedule.
How was it working with Carrie Fisher on that and Frank Gorshin? Because you worked with quite a unique cast on that movie.
I had been introduced to her by my friend Carol Caldwell. Carrie at that time had a drug problem and had just gotten out of rehab, and she was not bondable. The bond company, they have to make sure that the actors and the director and the main crew are going to be able to make it through. So I got to go through a physical every time I do a movie. But they wouldn't hire her because she just got out of rehab, and they didn't trust she wasn't going to fuck up and get loaded again and close the production down and cause an insurance claim. So I said to Sandy Howard, look, I know she'll do it. I know when people are loaded. She's totally clean right now. Let's hire her, please. He goes, okay, if we shut down, you're going to have to put your salary up to cover the insurance cost. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. I believe in Carrie Fisher that much.
Shit.
So I'll do that. And Carrie got through the movie. She did a fine job. Robin Wright was in the movie too, by the way. And Carrie got through the movie, and then she did that movie afterwards called Postcards from the Edge.
Yeah, I have not seen that one.
No, don't.
Okay.
All
right.
And she she hired Rob Reiner to portray me as a director of a shitty movie that she was working on. And I'm like, come on, bitch. I just got you back into business, and this is how you thank me. I know I shouldn't call a dead person bitch, but she did piss me off.
That's crazy though. So you put up for her and everything, and then after that, she burns you on the back end.
I put up for, I put my fucking salary on the line for Carrie Fisher. And then afterwards, she represents me in a film as in an insulting way, and that kind of is a story that tells you what Hollywood is like. There are no loyalties. You don't have any friends. I say I could count my punk rock friends from 30 years ago. I couldn't count them all in a day because I got so many of those friends because they're good people. They're honest and they have standards and integrity. Those are my friends, not these Hollywood assholes.
What was it like as far, did you, I wanted to ask about the score of Suburbia, because the score is like, it's legend, especially in the punk community, but it's just,
Alex Gibson, yeah.
Yeah, that's the synth comes in though, and you get it, and then like there's actually, like, I saw one time at the Hollywood Theater here in Portland. I know you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Somebody had cut like I don't know much about what the film was, but it was kind of just like cut of a bunch of like cool clips of punk movies, and it was of course there was like scenes from dudes in it, but there's the famous punk parade scene in Suburbia, and the fucking place just like rained with chaos. It was great.
Oh, cool.
I'd never been in an environment like that when I'd first gotten out here to see it. It was kind of fun. Like, even with, like, when Sid and Nancy came on the screen, because they did a cut from their interview, like, I'd never seen so many beer cans hit a movie screen. It was great.
Oh.
But anyway, now Suburbia debuted in the U.S. Was it July of '83 when it debuted?
That sounds about right.
like? So, Did you attend? Now it won Best Feature at the Chicago Film Festival. Did you attend that, and did you attend the other?
No, I didn't
Montreal
have the
Film
money to travel back and forth, and at that point, they just sent me a chunk of plastic or something that said I won something. And I honestly, I didn't even know what that meant at that point. I'm like, oh, I won an award at a Chicago festival. Trippy. I didn't even know. I didn't even know what it meant, But I was certainly flattered, I guess, But no, I wasn't. I didn't go to Chicago, and honestly, Bert and Roger, the producers, they didn't know what to do with the movie when it was done, because it was like they didn't get it, and they said, well, you got to go to Peoria. Oh no, what the hell? Not that's where Rich Pryor's from. What's that? Cleveland, right near Cleveland, some place over there. I had to go to and screen the movie because they wanted to see what Middle America would think of it. And of course, Middle America didn't get it either. They didn't know that 30, 40 years later, whatever it's been, it's going to be the punk rock Bible. We didn't know that. So we screened it, and we didn't get very good test cards from it. So Roger just kind of, gave it a shitty release. And if you've ever seen the original artwork on the cover of Suburbia, it's so embarrassing. It doesn't represent the kids at all. I was able to change it later and put the kids walking toward camera.
Which one is it? Is it the one with Skinner on the front that's on?
No, this is it was some artist drawing of some new wave bullshit person with a funky haircut. I don't know. But it was when I first realized, shit, man, I got to watch this marketing because these people don't get this shit, Well,
what do you remember about the reception and reaction towards Suburbia after its release?
I'll be honest with you, Reagan, that I had most of my films, except for Wayne's World, and the couple of studio movies I did after that, they never really got a decent release right when I finished them. It was really disappointing. I mean, I enjoyed making the movies, but to go to all that work and not have the movie seen was disheartening. And any sane person would have bailed long before I did. Anyway, so right when we finished it, Roger didn't promote it. He just put out a video cassette and with a shitty cover on it. And that was it. So anyway, boo-hoo!
Well, backtracking for a moment. Your film career started with 2 shorts. I've heard stories of the Richard Pryor Project, which is Uncle Tom's Fairy Tales, which you discussed a bit with Mark Maron on the WTF podcast back in 2015, but I haven't heard much about your 1971 short, I Don't Know. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, when I was a student at UCLA, we had the assignment to do project 1, 2, and 3. And I think I Don't Know was my project. No, that was my project 2. Anyway, whatever it was. Short films. I made 8 short films while I was at UCLA. Most people made 3. And Mark Toscano recently restored them all, and people are showing them, believe it or not, around the world right now, either as a whole program, which is about a 90-minute program for the 8 films, or they will individually show. Usually I Don't Know is the one that they love. And it's, back in the day, we used to have this tag. It's a love story between a boy that wishes he was a girl and a girl that wishes she was a boy.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it was really about my transgender friends back then. I found them to be extremely entertaining and fun. And this is way before punk rock, mind you. This is late 60s, early 70s. And back then, my best friends were trans people. and it was fun, guys and girls, and it was really fun because they were smart and always made me laugh. And I made 2 different movies, one called I Don't Know and one called Hats Off to Hollywood. Yeah.
Well, following those 2 short films, you shot The Decline of Western Civilization, the first of a trio of documentaries that cover the influence of punk music and 1980s heavy metal, and the lifestyle of crusty street punk teenagers in LA. Did you have any idea of how culturally significant this series was going to be when shooting it?
No. And as a matter of fact, I don't know, Reagan, if you know this or not, but recently The Decline of Western Civilization, the first one, was inducted into the Library of Congress National Film Registry. So
you made us official.
Did you know that?
No, I read that, but recently. Yeah. But I was saying you made us official, like punks. You put us in the history books. Now
right? Yeah. We broke into the National Film Registry, and it was it's kind of interesting to look back and think, oh, gosh, when I made the movie, I got so much criticism for it from those people who were afraid of punk rock. And yeah, I had no idea, to answer your question, I had no idea that they would be this culturally significant, and basically I was just doing the movies to kind of work through my own childhood bummers,
With the declines and taking some of the criticism from the punk stuff, I know you took the metal community took its swing at you with the Chris Holmes shit too. And what about decline? That I know that's a great story, but one that's been revisited much. But what about Decline 3 with the street punks then? What was the reception like to that? Because to me, that's almost my generation. So what was it like at the time there?
There was no reception for that. I brought the film. I paid for it with my own money that I made in the studios. And I brought the film to my agent's office, and he brought in all these agents to sit down so that all these geniuses could figure out how to market it or sell it or whatever. And it started playing, and these chicken shits just stood up one by one and drifted out of the room. So I was sitting there with just one guy at the end of it, and he goes, I can't do anything with this. So it never really got a release, and everybody that wanted to release it said, if you give us the rights to the first 2 declines, we'll release it. And I said, why don't you shove it up your ass? And so therefore, we had to just release it with the Decline 1 and 2 on the Shout Factory box set that we did a few years ago. That's really...
Oh, so the Shout Factory box set is like the first legitimate release for Decline 3 then?
Yeah. Yeah, there was... I used to make video cassettes, because that's all you had back then, and just give them away for free. Yeah. But I will say this. When I was working on Decline 3, I met some of the best friends of my life. And I met my boyfriend.
Yeah, that's where you met Sin, right?
Yeah. Somebody said, what does SIN stand for? And I asked him, he goes, right when I first met him, he goes, Satanic Intellectual Network. I'm like, I'm down with that. Anyway.
Well, how did you all meet on the set? What's the story behind that, if you don't mind?
What's the story behind what?
Behind you and Sin meeting with Decline of Western Civilization 3.
I was passing out flyers right in front of the Chinese theater, trying to get, because there was no social networking back then, and so we handed out pieces of paper, and I saw him sitting on the sidewalk, and I had already seen him hanging out with the other punks, and I said, could you give these flyers to your friends and ask them to come down and do an interview for my movie? And he looked up at me, and this dude was so fucking dirty. Have you ever seen those guys walking on the street that are just covered in black grime,
Yeah, the layer on the layer.
Homeless with layers on, and their hair's all matted up and everything. But that's what he looked like. But when he looked up at me, I looked in his eyes, and something happened. And I think they call it love at first sight, but I said, what the hell are you thinking, Penelope? Look at this scummy guy on the street, and you're thinking, what? Anyway,
Where does it go from there, though?
Well,
I mean, it obviously transpired.
I was driving around Hollywood, and this a few months later, and going to some AA meeting to give my friend a cake. And he was sitting on a bus bench, and I pull over and I go, hey, aren't you the guy that was in my movie? And he goes, hi, I've been in San Francisco, and I'm down here looking for you. I'm like, oh, well, you found me. And he went to the AA meeting with me, and then he said, if you want to see me again, I'll be over at Barnes and Noble's bookstore, and I'll be either in the physics or the art history section. And I thought, this dirty, filthy dude is going to be in the physics section. Okay. So I went to the bookstore a couple days later, and there he was.
Oh, what's his?
And it's been 25 years now.
What kind of physics books does he like? Does he still do physics? I like physics a lot. We can nerd out.
The fact of the matter is, he's one of those kind of guys like in that movie, A Beautiful Mind.
Oh, John Nash. I love it. Yeah, John Nash struggled with schizophrenia really bad. I was sad to hear he passed away from a car accident a few years ago.
Yes, exactly. Well, Sin has schizophrenia, and it was not treated for a long time. We just thought he was really cuckoo.
Yeah.
And he is. But he's also a genius. And so over the years, I've learned more and more about him. You can ask him anything, man. When Jeopardy was, Alex Trebek was still on Jeopardy, this dude, we would watch the show, he had every answer.
I mean, he's like Kim Pete going on there, like in that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, he's so educated and so smart. He's a Japanese guy that was raised by a Jewish mom. And he was on the street for probably 10 years before he started living in my $1 million home.
Oh, how was the transition? Did he take the piss out of you a lot?
Never. You kidding me?
No.
Never. He's very, very respectful, very appreciative. He's got more integrity than anyone I've ever met, and is smarter than anyone I've ever met. And I feel very fortunate to, have these 25 years I've spent with him.
How is your relationship over the past 25 years? You two still very tight, stay very focused on your relationship?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've had to bail him out of jail quite a few times, and get him out of the nut house a few times. Spent a bunch of money on lawyers and everything. But now that he's medicated and he's straight, everything's good. It's been a real adventure, and I'm going to write a book on it, so I'll stop talking about it right now. But, think about that, millionaire director falls in love with a grimy, homeless dude and stays with them for 25 years. It's a good story.
Yeah, I know. And it's got its surrealist aspects. And in that, does it feel surreal to you and to Sin, even all this time later?
No, me and him just kind of close out the rest of the world, and we're fine together, and we never argue. We have a very, very happy life together. And I have a list of all the dudes over the years that shut me down. One of them's name is Michael Wilcox, who lives up in Portland.
Oh, all right.
And if you're listening, Michael, I'm giving you the finger right now.
Oh, you can tell him, let it out. Let him go. You got the whole world. Let him go. Let him know.
But I had all these boyfriends that always kind of shut me down. Matter of fact, you spoke about Suburbia. I was kind of flirting with Alex Gibson when I gave him the job, but he didn't really want to hook up. So I'm like, shit. Well, go ahead and do the score anyway. I don't really like that score, except for the marching, when the kids are marching toward camera. I know you like the score, but I'm not really in love with it.
All right, I don't like it anymore.
You funny.
Throughout your directorial career, I'm gonna ask you one of them cliche questions. Who gave your greatest filmmaking advice?
Well, my mother was such a trailblazer, and she ran away with a carnival when she was 19 years old, and she was really a character. I learned really a lot from her, and I'm going to have to say it is not anybody in the movie business that gave me my best advice, but it was Gypsy, my mother. And she said, Penelope, never trust anybody in show business. Now, that doesn't include you.
Well, we're so low on the spectrum down here. I don't think,
Yeah, well, whatever. But you have a cool show. But that's what my mom told me, and it's been very, very helpful because you can't. And I hate to say, I can't trust anybody that I ever really worked with, Maybe Kathy Nelson, my friend from MCA Records. I can trust her. Maybe I can trust Riley Ellis that worked on Beverly Hillbillies over at Fox. There's two out of 100 and 300,
My uncle watches broadcast TV like religiously, and he was watching Beverly Hillbillies this morning, and it was the episode with Ellie Mae, and she's trying to save the turkey. She don't want to kill the turkey. And he was like, you're interviewing the director of Beverly Hillbillies, and I know that wasn't a film you appreciated.
Well, I didn't do the original.
Well, I know. That's what I told him. I was like, she didn't do the original, but she made the movie.
Yeah.
But I was like, we're not talking about that. But he was like, he just kind of looked at me like, oh shit, no way. It was a big thing for him.
When I did Beverly Hillbillies, Erica Aliniak, who is a darling girl, she and great actress too. She was getting out of a pool or something, and we had a deer, like Bambi kind of deer around, and the deer attacked her.
Oh.
I mean, whoever think deer would attack people, But yeah.
Did like maul her seriously? Did it like seriously hurt her?
He started jumping up on her and hitting her with the hoofs, and the wranglers, animal wranglers, had to come and pull the deer off of Ellie Mae, for crying out loud.
Wow, that's pretty wild. All right, well, Penelope, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
I'm going back to bed, brother.
It's been amazing.
Oh yeah, it is. It's early. We don't normally do early ones, but it's
good
to get it out of the way.
I didn't sleep all night, so I hope whatever I said was the truth.
All right, well, if not, print the legend, right?
Yeah. I like you guys.
But me and Poxy are very grateful that you made time to speak with us about your work as a writer and director on the 1984 cult classic Suburbia.
Yes, thank you so much, Penelope.
All right, thanks, you guys. Take care. All right. Bye.
All right, I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and you've just heard from director Penelope Spheeris right here on The Ghost of Hollywood.
Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly.
Can't get enough of The Ghost of Hollywood? Check out our entire first season, now streaming wherever you choose to listen to your podcast. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
While you're at it, check out our website at theghostofhollywood.com so that we can keep you up to date on all the latest with The Ghost of Hollywood.
Well, that was a fucking trip.
You're telling me. I love Penelope Spheeris. Probably one of my favorite guests that we've had so far.
Now I kind of want to rewatch Dudes just so I can see if I can pick off the leaving double.
What do you think about her feelings towards the boys next door?
No one cares what I think, Reagan.
That's true, but while I thought you described it well, it's understandable to hear what she has to say reflecting, especially after we interviewed Fritz about the Children of the Corn, and he discussed the responsibility a filmmaker has for the work they create.
And I'm gonna jump a bit, but nothing against Corman, but the obvious give and take of financial access that he gave directors, in exchange for the exploitative compromise of the films, it leaves me curious about the proof in the pudding.
What do you need?
Well, did the exploit additives really assure a heavy level of ticket sales for New World? For me, everything we discussed that falls under this blanket in Suburbia seems excessive. I'm not going to argue other movies, but particularly this one, you could cut those scenes and it wouldn't change much of anything overall concerning the play of the film.
Maybe the garage scenes.
Well, yeah, but I love the garage scenes. And okay, I'll bait. I'll at least speak from personal experience in saying that, some of what I saw as a young punk in Suburbia definitely influenced a little emulation. In the up-and-coming, watching that movie and knowing its credibility, you had to at least live up to the status of some of its characters.
Sure you weren't crashing the pose over there, Poxy?
Oh, hit me low, Ray. But I'll fess. Okay, so it had some lines that I wouldn't cross. It was like Clockwork Orange, right? Sure, most kids were tough enough to fight it out with one another, after they saw that movie, like Youth Gang Style or commit some petty crime, but when it came to playing chicken on the highway or even more serious things like rape, that was where I know most people, I'm hoping, drew the line.
Yeah, but Clockwork brought the unreal to a full and artistic effect.
Yeah, and it pissed off a lot of people, too, when it came out, but all right, so fair enough, right? Suburbia definitely had little to no surrealist appeal. It's largely an honest film, but that seems to reinforce what I think we're saying here.
We get it. Petty youth crime is one thing, but turning smart Alex is an entirely different thing.
Yeah, But alright, Boys Next Door then. Charlie Sheen versus Max Caulfield.
Yeah, but that didn't stop Charlie from going along for the ride.
Yeah, but the ending twists that up, though, Even though the film isn't incredibly deep or driving at a message, the characters are loud in, their foretelling of self through action.
Still, though, Charlie Sheen's character seems more self-aware of his cause, but he tries to claim responsibility for it in an odd way.
Yeah, but in the end, it only makes you hate him more. It overloads and reinforces his cowardice, too.
Exactly. Like, why the hell didn't you shoot this guy when he was murdering innocent people?
The answer to that defines the follower's form of crazy, I guess, but that's what makes it a movie. Anyway, back on topic, what about the end of Suburbia?
I guess you can interpret it more loosely. It seems simpler. Everyone got carried away and someone innocent was killed.
Yep, collective insanity. Forever only to be breached by regret and misery.
This has gotten a little serious for the Ghost of Hollywood, Poxy.
Why can't we be serious?
Because we're being opine.
You're right. Fuck this. It's time to get out of here anyway.
Alright, everyone. I'm Miss Ragan here with Poxy Leonard, and we'd like to thank tonight's guest, director Penelope Spheeris, for joining us on the show to revisit her work on the 1984 film Suburbia.
Alright, wall crawlers. This concludes the 14th episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. For more information on the show or to check out other episodes, please visit our website at theghostofhollywood.com. We'd also like to thank KBOO Community Radio for their support of The Ghost of Hollywood by providing a continuous platform on 90.7 FM Portland. You can donate to KBOO Community Radio, which is listener-powered, at kboo.fm by checking the donate button in the top right-hand corner of the page and letting them know how you support the radio station or The Ghost of Hollywood if you heard it here tonight. And also you can choose the amount that you would like to donate of your choice. So thanks to our hardworking crew here at Electric Garden Company as well for all of their efforts putting this episode together. Everything that they do makes this show possible and, even more important, fun to create. So, yeah.
Okay, think that covers it. Until next time, everybody, good morning and good night.
You have been listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. The Ghost of Hollywood was created and is directed by Zach Flannery. It is authored by Chris Klon. Background music composition by Jesse Garcia in Pineapple Nightmare. Mixing and mastering and final production by Zach Flannery and Grady Sizemore at Microphonic Meltdown. Performances by Reagan Flannery and Zach Flannery. Production management by Beth Flannery. For more information, contact, or to listen to The Ghost of Hollywood, please visit theghostofhollywood.com. The Ghost of Hollywood was produced by the Electric Garden Company in Portland, Oregon. For more information on the Electric Garden Company, please visit electricgardencompany.com.